Welcome to AI Behind the Screens. My name is Vilde, and I'm Director of AI Engineering here at Vend, and responsible for how we transform our product development with AI. And Vend makes the marketplaces that you know and love, like Finn and Blocket and DBA and many others. And right now we're in the middle of an AI transformation that I think is really, really cool and quite hard. So in this podcast, I want to dive more into what's actually working with that and how we're doing it and what we're still figuring out and haven't figured out yet. And I'm usually in the thick of this every day, but today I'm excited to take a step back and dive a bit more into the different topics that we have around AI. Today I have Thomas Eide, our AI expert, and our CFO, PC Merlan. And we're going to dive into AI behind the screens in finance. Okay, let's start with you, PC. A year ago, you weren't that particularly focused on AI, and then you had a big shift, at least from my perspective. Can you tell us a bit about what happened?
Yeah, I can. I think there's probably, let's say, two things happening in parallel. So I'll take them in order. I think that the first sort of big shifts that have happened. I mean, AI has been around for many years. So, both individually for me in finance, but also in the companies I work for, and also in Vend. And just one example is that both myself and all my finance leaders, they had, let's say, their own development goals, related to AI. But as we went through last year, I got more and more frustrated that we didn't really see any meaningful progress. Right, so we were talking about it, but in reality, not much happened. So that frustration was building up, and then I started reflecting on my own leadership. To what extent have I, as a CFO, as a leader, embraced it and actually doing the change myself? And I realized that I was, as bad as anyone else. And then I started reflecting on why, and how can, if I really expect my leaders and my function and Vend as a whole to embrace AI and bring it forward, I need to do it myself as well. So that was kind of happening. In addition, the second kind of topic that happened was that I worked in this type of role for 15, 20 years now. I'm quite confident in my skills, my experience. I've been quite, been succeeding in what I've done so far, and kind of thinking that, okay, this will also take me into the future. But what became more and more evident that, as AI was progressing throughout last year, I was thinking, okay, if I don't get my act together, it might take 3 years, it might take 5 or even 10, but at some point, we could be completely, let's say, irrelevant in my role, and there will be new talents coming up, using new tools, working in a different way, that will completely outcompete me as a CFO. So I actually woke up 3 o'clock one night, basically in panic, and said, "Oh shit, I need to do something differently." So these two things was basically coming together in August, and I was on a leadership development program in Finland. And the last task of that program was to sit down and reflect on your own leadership and commit to some changes that you wanted to do. So that was basically the trigger point for me deciding, okay, I need to do something else.
And what was the ambition that you set?
Yeah, I mean that's a process. So I have this sort of standard process for myself. Sitting down, okay, so what do I want to achieve? What do I need to do to achieve it? What are the frame conditions that needs to be in place, and so on. So what I decided was that, okay, I don't know the long term. There's a lot of things I cannot control. But what I can do, I can sit down, I can dedicate 4 months of last year, basically to increase my skill level as much as I can. So I did several things. I signed up for our internal development program, Bob the Builder, that we can talk a bit more about in a minute, where I basically spend 1 day every week learning quite sort of basic product development engineering skills. That was completely new to me. I never done that in my past. And as part of that, there's a lot of AI, let's say, topics as well. But then I started getting up 1 hour earlier each morning, reading about AI. So I read all different type of articles and content. I started listening to podcasts when commuting to and from work, when I was training. And I started setting up meetings with, we have a lot of great AI experts around in Vend, meeting them, talking about AI with them, what they're doing, what's working, what's not working. So in totality, I dedicated a lot of time. But I also made very conscious sort of, okay, what changes do I need to do? So I went to my boss, our CEO, and talked about this and got his support for this agenda. I had to go to my team because I reduced my availability towards my team. I canceled all my social media for 4 months, just to free up time to be able to do this. So that was an intense but very exciting experience.
Cool. And Thomas, how has your journey to AI been?
Oh, where do I begin? So when I started experimenting with AI, I was an ERP consultant, so working with finance and logistics. And then ChatGPT came around, and I was like, okay, well, I saw that sort of using APIs was the future for ERP at the time. To sort of how do we build integrations, especially how do we pull that out? How do we, set up data warehouses and stuff like that? But I didn't have the technical knowledge myself. So the big moment for me was when I was working on this integration for a really big project, and I had no idea, like API payloads, like what the hell is that? And then I went to the API spec of the system that we had, threw it into ChatGPT and said what I wanted, and I got a payload back. And the payload is basically what you send to an API. And it worked. And then I was like, holy shit. And after that, I think, I spent, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 hours a day since then. And then that turned me into sort of an awkward role internally, because the things that I was doing, no one else did or even knew was possible. And then I got more and more into development and working with the tech teams and sort of trying to bridge a gap between, we have customers and we have ERP consultants on the one side, and then we have developers and sort of technical people on the other side. Translating that was sort of the big sort of AI moment for me. And then over time, as I built more and more stuff, then I got more into sort of developing things, and that laid the foundation of where I am today. So it's a 3-year journey, I would say.
Nice. And we've mentioned the Builder program that in a sense started or was part of the beginning of this journey. So maybe we can first just explain what the Builder program is, and then talk a little bit about why you decided to sign up for that instead of having someone else in your team join the program.
Yeah, so starting on your last point there, why I signed up myself and not, I think AI fundamentally shifts how we work on all levels and all functions. And I think one of the major shifts would be that we need to be much more hands-on and have, we cannot delegate this to someone else to understand it and figure it out. And that impacts my role a lot as a senior leader, that I need to be a lot closer than maybe I'm used to over my last few years. So for me to be able to work effectively with someone like Thomas, I need to at least have a sort of basic level of skills to be able to understand what we talk about, the language, the terms. I don't need to be an expert. There will always be, people like Thomas and others that knows a lot more about AI and technology than I do. But if I can increase my skill level, I can be much more effective from my point of view. So that was the first one. And then, just we have, being part of Vend, it's an amazing place to be, because we have, let's say, we have so many people that can actually develop in-house a development program that's probably state of the art of what you can get anywhere else. So instead of going on YouTube or signing up for a leadership course at INSEAD or something, you do it together with your colleagues. So it's actually, around, last year, around 100 of our employees went through that programs. And that's basically a program for non-engineers. to learn, basic program development and AI skills. And that was, really hard, to be honest, because it's very different. There's a lot of new terminology you have to learn. You have to really get back to school. But it was amazing.
Yeah, I think this, if I can share my own perspective as well, this from the Department of AI, we've been preaching this: you cannot outsource your learning a lot, especially to leaders. I really agree, and I think it's very important. And I think I remember this moment when you woke up in the middle of the night, because we had a presentation to the leadership team, and then we had been talking about these scenarios about what could happen, and then the same day ChatGPT apps were launched by OpenAI, and it really hit a lot of this. It was a bit, we got lucky, and then all of you were suddenly like 100% on board, and like, okay, we have to act on this now or yesterday. So yeah, I think that's really true. What's been your journey with the Builder program, Thomas, as one of the people orchestrating it or making it happen?
Yeah, so first of all, there's a lot of people that's been involved in that. It's not just me. And my role in the totality was pretty small in the Builder program itself. But yeah, I must admit, I found it hard myself because I'm very used to code. So code is my tool. Then sort of switching that over to sort of a visual workflow, step by step, very logical thinking. That was a bit of a transition for me, to be honest. I've had some experience with Anyden before, but sort of one thing is sort of building and experimenting on your own, but then also helping others, But over time, I've really grown fond of it. I think also the things that we thought in the or teached in the program is also something that I've also had great use for myself, and sort of thinking that I don't need this Builder program. I know everything. No, not at all. So yeah, so it was very helpful for me, I'd say.
Cool. And I think something very interesting that we're starting to see the effects of this investment that you made, but also the investment that the company has made and the support that we have available, and that the finance department is shaping up in a very different way and now being more or less rebuilt around access to AI and being able to access data in a new way. But this started out with you, or maybe it didn't start out, but Thomas, you set out to build a finance agent, but now you've ended up building something else. Can you tell us about that journey?
Yeah, so as a part of the Builder program, PC really wanted to make a sort of financial analyst that could answer all of the sort of top-level financial information that the C-suite always asks. And we did that. So the prerequisite of everything was that finance has done an amazing sort of transition internally to get control of our finance data, because that was a challenge before, to say the least. And sort of building on top of that foundation, what we wanted to do was to have a finance agent that, at least in the beginning, could answer P&L questions in an accurate way that we can actually trust it. And so what we did initially was that we built an MCP server. So it's basically a way to connect to other systems via a standardized format, like a USB-C connector for AI. And we did it super strict. We had a set of tools that could sort of pull various different financial information, but done in a very controlled manner. And it worked well for what it was designed for. The challenge with that was, as soon as we wanted to introduce another source of information, or we wanted to introduce another dimension, or whatever the case might be, there was real development effort to make that happen. Not that that was really complex, but like every single time that you do something, you need to update that. And we tried to plug it into ChatGPT, and the experience was not great, because there is a middle layer between ChatGPT and the connectors that you connect to. That sort of it doesn't want to do a lot of tool calls, which is a bit of a challenge if you're sort of fetching a lot of different information from various sources and sort of putting it all together. And then we had a switch internally to move away from ChatGPT. The reason for that was to sort of, we want to offer a broader suite of tools. in order to do so, we wanted to sort of reduce our dependency on OpenAI and sort of open up for more options. And I thought, okay, well, now we have this foundation, we have this switch. Now I want to go crazy. What happens if I connect to Snowflake, I pull out all of the sort of data model information that we need in order to sort of make good queries, and just let it run free? What happens? And the result was quite shocking, because till this date, I had a chat with one of the finance data guys about sort of, okay, accuracy. I need to know accuracy. Is it okay? And he said that, well, it hasn't made a mistake yet, which was a complete surprise to me, because it's literally just a cloud skill. So it has some schema information, it has some information about the company, and sort of how to navigate the data model that finance has set up. And it's working extremely well. So sort of going from sort of very, okay, we need to make sure it's correct, we need to have audit logging, and like it needs to be secure, and to just, yeah, let's mop up a skill, access control is in Snowflake. And then, yeah. So last time I talked to one of the leaders in finance, he basically said that, yeah, he's not in Tableau anymore, which is the reporting solution that we use. So yeah, quite a journey.
That's pretty cool.
Can I just share a story on that? Because actually, before we started working together with Thomas and the team, we got super excited about the, let's say, the possibilities around AI. So we took all the information we had and we uploaded it, and we started using ChatGPT at the time. And, half of the time it was amazing. It gave us, an incredible insight and data. And half of the time it was completely off. And when you work with, let's say, more text-based data where 90% quality is good enough, it's quite flexible. You can easily use it. But when we talk about financial data that we need to trust, it needs to be accurate every single time. We have to just scrap that setup. And then we went through the process that Thomas now described. That was quite rigid and limited in one way, because we have to make sure that we could trust the data and we understood what come out. But through those two learnings, at the same time, the capabilities of AI have just sort of gone through the roof. We are now at a stage where we basically can just connect Claude Code directly to Snowflake and the Helix database, which is where we could store all the financial data in a secure way. And we can get, the full impact of the AI solutions. And the good thing, as long as we then have control on the access rights, we can make this available to anyone that needs it. So it is a fundamental change for us as a finance function going forward.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that you've been able to, or we've been able to make LLMs do math correctly, because that's not what they're known for. Fun fact, I googled how many R's are in strawberry in Norwegian, which is 2, but it still answers 3, because now it's been retrained on all the answers in English being 3 R's in strawberry.
Right.
But so maybe we can talk about what are some of the building blocks that we needed to be in place for the simple approach to work much better. I can imagine data correctness and access to data is a hot topic.
Yeah. So just a sort of fun fact. When I started in Vend about a year ago, I was asked to do an AI readiness assessment for finance to sort of see like what can we do with AI and sort of how can we get started. And our answer was, sorry, you're not ready. It's not just about the AI. There was a lot of other sort of data issues. I mean, you can talk about that busy, but you need to have your data in order. That is number one. The AI layer is the thinnest layer on top. So maybe we can talk about like what kind of transformation except AI is finance going through right now that sort of set this up busy.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. It's interesting whenever you work with an AI, challenge, problem, topic, it takes around 5 minutes before it becomes a data problem and topic. So in reality, what we have worked the most with, over the last few months is basically to, continue to deepen and increase the quality, our understanding and structure our data in a good way, so we can actually get the full benefit of, let's say, the AI tools that just become smarter and smarter every day. But the cool thing is now is that most people don't find it very sexy to work with, gathering data, structuring data, do quality assurance, but because it takes so long time to value, so you don't really see the value of the work you're doing. But now you can almost get instant reward, right? So if you get a new data source into your, Snowflake that we use as a platform, you can kind of immediately get effect out of it because the AI solution becomes much smarter. So that's the cool thing, and that's what we work a lot with now. And still early days. I think we have good let's say situation around our core financial data, but now we're working on really bringing in FTE people data. We're bringing in more commercial data and statistics. Then we can start combine this in a very effective way. And given the flexibility of our AI platforms, you don't need to spend 3 months to develop a report or a visualization. You can basically do it on the go.
Okay, let's move on to another topic, which is kind of the reason that I invited you both here at the same time, which is to talk a bit about what happens when you have a leader and a builder or an expert working together. I know you haven't worked directly together on a lot of this. It's together with the whole finance department. But so PC, you were closely involved in this early on and testing approaches, figuring out what would work long term. And how did that collaboration with Thomas and the people in finance shape what you ended up making?
Maybe I can start and then you can chip in. So, this is an amazing situation to be in, right? So we have very skilled finance professionals, and we had more than eight people joining Bob the Builder program. So we have a lot of finance skills and experience as part of the program, and that's good and it's important. Each of us have our own kind of project, and we have talked a little bit about, let's say, my own project and as part of the Bob the Builder program. But then we're so lucky to have Thomas supporting each of us, and then there are a lot of synergies in between there, where we can then combine, call it the functional understanding and expertise with the kind of the deep knowledge and both the opportunities and limitation around AI. And I think is so powerful when you can kind of combine those two, let's say, skill sets and build that sort of bridge in between. So you can understand me and I can understand you, and then you become very, very powerful.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a lot of sort of the AI push today is sort of having a one-man army instead of working together, which I think is a bit interesting. Is sort of let's make sure that each individual can do as much as possible, and sort of a techie going into the functional things and vice versa, instead of why don't you pair up a technical resource with the domain expert. The technical resource take care of all the technical stuff, and the domain expert make sure that the sort of broader picture is working and that the financial information that comes back is correct. I think once we set up the sort of first experiment we did, we talked about we want to like a list of typical P&L questions, mainly because I wanted to understand what are the typical questions that PC asks if he got access to this, and also what does the data allow us to actually do, and also to have a foundation to run evals to sort of see, is this crazy or is it correct? So I think a big part of the success is pairing technical resources with domain experts. I think that is not just you and me, but also the broader collaboration between DAI and finance as well. Sort of a nice mix of profiles.
Just a quick comment on that, because Thomas gave me that task and said, I need you to give me, what are the questions that you are, want to get the answers to as part of this solution. And I was sitting there, oh my God, am I going to sit down and write down all the questions? And then Thomas said, but just use AI. Right, and it's just a good example of we have to rethink on how do we actually work, and so I basically just sat down with ChatGPT at the time and just sort of said, I'm CFO at Vend, I want to have these questions, we're doing this, giving them context, and basically getting I think 150, 200 questions that will take me a long time to just write out in words, export it into a Google Sheets document and sending it off to Thomas. And then you had a lot to work with, and setting up the, again, using AI to run the tests and validation.
Yeah, and sort of what happened afterwards was that, okay, some questions are in scope with the data that we have, and some questions are not in scope. You can use AI to figure out what is in scope and what is not in scope based on the data that we have. So, yeah, it was a sort of AI developed from start to finish on top of the foundation that finance laid out data-wise.
And one, I don't know if it's a theory, it's maybe a hypothesis that we have, is that an organization will only go as far as its leader when it comes to transformation. And I think it's not the full story, but one reason that Vend is quite ahead or doing really well is that our CEO, who has also been on the podcast, has been pushing this for a long time. And I think we can see the same for each department that we have or each area, that the mindset of the leader in that place will can limit or not limit how far the department can get. And Thomas, how did PC's journey with being a really good CFO on AI change the conditions for what you were building in finance?
I think the biggest thing is interest and drive. But I think it's not that you need to know everything about AI, like you said previously, PCs, but it's about understanding the opportunity space and sort of wanting to drive something that is both realistic and accomplishable. So I think that's one part of it. The other part of it is sort of the signals it sends to the organization as well. It's also quite powerful, I would say, compared to just working with sort of a regular finance operator. Yeah, I would say that it's been a fantastic collaboration. It really has.
Just to share a kind of experience from my own is that, I talked about this sort of setting of this program for myself that I'm pushing through, and that's my way of dealing with it. Because when I was younger, in earlier in my career, I was more like a sponge. I was just trying to learn as much as possible. I was chasing all the opportunities, figuring out. And honestly, as I get older and more experienced, that fades out a bit. You do more based on past learnings, basic experience, and that can take you quite far. You don't have to learn a lot of new stuff every single day. And I think as humans we are quite lazy. So if you had that opportunity, it feels quite comfortable to sit back and enjoy the ride. So and I can also feel it after I completed this 4 months, is that very quickly I go back to my old habits. Honestly, my calendars are filled up with a lot of meetings again. I started using social media, spending way too much time on social media again, and I don't listen to as much AI podcasts anymore. So is this sort of constant, let's say, how can you facilitate making sure and push it and nudge yourself, actually to push yourself out of the comfort zone to learn new things? Because when I do it, I love it. I get so much energy from it. But if I don't sort of structure it, I very quickly fall back to my old habits, my old way of working. So that is a kind of a never-ending journey, I think, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. And how has it been for you in finance to have Thomas, who is part of a different department, coming in with a bit of an external perspective internally, compared to just trying to transform from within finance?
It's been amazing, I have to say. You're really sort of kind of opened up the let's say the opportunity space. I've gotten so much great feedback from my finance colleagues also on the way you have supported and helped them on this journey. The only challenge is that we want to have more of Thomas's time, and we want more of Thomas. So that's a limitation that we need to figure out how to live with. Part of that is that we get upskill ourselves, that more of our people can do more. But we will always need one or more Thomases as part of this journey. So that's I mean that's a challenge for all of us, is how to get enough competence capacity. But
yeah,
I also think that's sort of, I was really involved in the beginning, but I mean now finance is flying on its own.
Yeah, but I think it's something that we've seen in other functions as well, that this combination of top down and bottom up at the same time is really, really powerful. And you can get a ways with either, but with both, it's really, you will get much further.
Yeah, but I will also say cross-functional. Right? So one is, let's say, call it so CFO and an expert, but it is also, tech and finance. So you need all of those domains, and you don't need to have them all at the same, always. But that we now have new challenges where we need support, right? So some things we can now manage on our own, but then we reach some new bottlenecks, some new issues that we need to resolve to be able to move forward. And then to be effective, we then need to have, someone that has a deeper technical skill set than what we do.
What would you say is the next frontier for AI and finance?
I think we still don't know, where it will take us. But we start to see, let's say, some opportunities. And I think, no matter how many people you are or how much competence you have in finance, there's a lot of things you would like to do that you cannot do because you don't have the time, you don't have the resources. So what AI enables us to do is to do a lot of things that we couldn't do in the past. So I think that is sort of one thing that we really want to take advantage of. Do more analysis, analyze data, more recommendation, more reports. Do more stuff. But it's also access to data and information, and traditionally things are sort of locked into different sort of pockets in the organization, different experts and so on. And you need to go. Let's say if I have a question, I might have to go 3 levels down into the organization to get the information and insight. And I've set myself a goal that within a year, I should myself have access to all the steering information I need, both financial and non-financial. I have no clue if it's possible, but I don't see it as a limitation from a technical point of view. I think the challenge will be on the topic we discussed before around data and how we are able to sort of get the data sources properly in place. But by using, Claude Code and the tool sets, linked directly to Snowflake, all the possibilities are there. And what that will enable us is that, all of us can then start to understand better, what we do well, where we can improve, what are the opportunities. And I think that can unlock a huge, potential improving our performance.
Yeah, I would say on the current trajectory, I think including data from our marketplace, product data, ARPA data, FTE data, sort of getting more sources in that can sort of paint a bigger picture is going to be the next thing. And then I think a dimension that we haven't really explored yet is sort of all the operational stuff in finance. It's very much towards reporting and getting insights into data and forecasting and stuff like that, which is great. But I suppose the next really big challenge would be, okay, how do we get AI in as a function in finance? That is a much bigger challenge, I would say. Sort of once the data is available and the sort of structure of the data makes sense, it's not really that complex to build good AI solutions on top of it. But once you want to actually do, I want to post some kind of journal, or I want to post an invoice and do that agentically. Okay, here are some invoices from this vendor. Oh, here's a deviation. This looks weird. Let me ping, PC or whatever handles that in finance. Like that part, the real agentic part is still TBD.
But that sounds really cool. I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of areas, that getting AI into how we're operating the whole business, and not just analyzing or processing things afterwards, I think will be really key and super interesting. And excited to maybe have it back next year to see how it went. So maybe we can close off with some advice. What would you say to someone who isn't as far as us on this journey, if they're just getting started? Maybe Thomas first.
I would say, first of all, you need time and space. I think that is number one. I think thinking back to when I started my own AI journey, I did everything related to AI outside of working hours. I would not recommend that to anyone, to sort of make sure that you have a life outside of work. That's number one. But sort of make sure that you have time and space for it. Talk to your leaders to actually get that. And maybe if that is hard to do, maybe prepare a little case for them. I want to look into this, and that. This is what I'm expecting to get out of it. And this is what I can maybe share with the broader group. And then once you have that time and space, I would say just get going. Pick a tool. It doesn't matter. If it's Cloud Code or Gemini or ChatGPT, whatever, that really does not matter. Just get going. That would be my advice. But time and space, number one.
Good advice.
Yeah.
What about you, Peter?
No, I agree with you. I mean, that is, if you don't do that, you just get stuck in a way. Either you get stressed or burn out, or you're not able to progress. So you need to find, let's say, your way in a way, depending on the situation and context, to free up enough time. But it's not just calendar time; it's also the mental capacity. So if you need to also make sure that you have enough, let's say, mental space to focus, at least for a few hours a day. So one example I did is I blocked out 3-hour blocks as part of my workday. That is not easy to do, but it is possible. And if you just use the recommendation from Thomas, to talk around, the work situation with your manager, find a way to do that. And then what I also mentioned, what is really hard is to change habits, particularly when you get older and you be working in a certain way, is to, let's say, don't give up, because it's not going to come easy. You will be super frustrated of, I don't see the value of this. It takes me more time. I can do it quicker if I just do it the old way. But after you have done it a few times, you actually start to see, either you learn new stuff or you start to see the effects of it. So you need some patience. It will take time. But I think it's not an option not to do it, honestly. I think, as I come back to what I say, I fundamentally believe that all of us, if we don't jump on this train, at some point, we will be irrelevant. And I don't think anyone wants that, right? So the best way to do it is that we have all the opportunities in the world working in Vend. We should have, part of our work time, we should have the opportunity to invest time. We have access to the best tools that are out there. We have experts like Thomas and yourselves available to help us and guide us along the way. And we are basically in the centerpiece of this whole AI storm. So what better place to be than to work in Vend and then just try to figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah. I think, just to add a reflection on that, I think it's also practicing change, not doing like, okay, now I'm going to set aside 2 weeks to change my process and then I'm going to have my new version forever. It's just, there's more and more change, and just practice dealing with change as it comes. But yeah.
Yeah, I also think that, there really isn't an option not to do it. I think another advice would be, don't resist it. It's not going to go well for you long term. Like, you can be sort of against AI as much as you want. If you genuinely don't think that there is a use case for you out there, okay, sure. But at least give it a shot, because the train is going fast. And sort of the longer you get behind, assuming that you get the time and the space to actually do it, I would say don't hesitate.
And also, even if it's scary, because you don't really know where it's going to take us, you don't know what the impact will be. I will focus more on opportunities, so on what it actually can enable us to do. How much better can I be as a CFO by combining my experience, my knowledge, let's say, call it my leadership skills, combined with advanced AI solutions. I can do so much more than what I can do today. And I think that goes for any role and any function.
Yeah. And you can have more fun, and you can change the way you're working quite a lot.
Yeah, I would not be here today without sort of the AI push that I did. Like, no chance. So I think, get going.
Cool. Thank you so much for taking us behind the screens of AI in finance.
Thank you.
Thank you.